Welcome back to the Pod McFleet. I am your host, Marta McFly. And after last week's episode where we covered a specific movie, for this week, we're not going to get into the nitty gritty. I kind of need a break as well. And we're going to do another one of those lovely little roundup episodes. So, for my guest today, we're going to be covering the coming of age genre. And I picked him because he's someone who I honestly can't think of anybody else in the online space who champions the coming of age genre more than he does. He's a film content creator and also one of the four co hosts of the ReelTok podcast alongside one of my previous guests, Seth. George Carmi, hello. Good sir, how are you?
Hello, I'm doing great. I'm very excited to be here and even more excited to talk about coming of age films because as you said, I feel like I talk too much about coming of age, but that's never a bad thing. So I'm very excited.
Perfect. Yeah. I mean, one thing that attracted me most about your reviews online when I found you was just the fact that people know you're going to be honest. There's no sugarcoating. And if you like a movie, you will wax poetic about it. But if you don't, you make that very clear as well. But you also give reasons as to why you don't like something. It's not just like, I don't like this and that's it. So I honestly really appreciate that approach. And I just think you're very thoughtful when it comes to your reviews. So kudos to you.
Thank you. Yeah, I like to keep it authentic. I get a lot of comments all the time like, "Hey man, why are you so like aggressive and why are you cursing so much?" And I'm like, "I don't mean to." Like if I'm passionate about something or if I like really dislike something, like you'll hear it in my tone and the way I like present myself. But thank you. Thank you. That was very kind.
Of course. So, I mean, before we get into today's chat, do you want to share what you've been watching recently for my listeners and also selfishly for me?
Yeah. Planet of the Apes. I'm sure you've seen like me, Seth, Tyler, and Cam just logging Planet of the Apes episodes like crazy over the last couple of
Mhm.
days because we're doing a Planet of the Apes like deep dive tomorrow when we record on ReelTok.
Beautiful.
And I have never seen the original five or Tim Burton's. So I specifically wanted to like make sure those were all checked off my list. But outside of Apes, I saw the TV Glow,
Mm.
which I was going to include in like my five favorite coming of age films because,
Oh,
yeah, I really do think it's like up there. But I want to give it a second watch. And also, like, for your sake, I don't want to talk about the movie. I want you to
thank
go
you.
in, not necessarily like blind, but it's like a movie you just need to experience and feel. And I don't want to like sway your mindset before you go into it. So
Okay.
I'm excluding that, but that's how much that's how good I think this movie is. It was
Wow.
close to being in my five that we were going to talk about today. I watched Uptown Girls, which I found out was one of Ash's favorites,
Aw.
which surprisingly I really liked. It's like a very cliche, like early 2000s
Mm.
dramedy, I would say. But I don't know. There's like deeper thematic elements of like grief and maturity, and they really resonated with me. And I'll say this time and time throughout this entire episode, any movie with a New York City backdrop is like just has my heart immediately. Um, and then last week on the Real Talk podcast, we did a Ryan Gosling episode. So I checked off a
Ooh.
few Ryan Gosling first watches, including Song to Song, Terrence Malick's
Mhm.
film, Only God Forgives, and then a couple of rewatches like First Man and The Fall Guy. But that's about it. It's actually been like outside of the Apes movies this week, it's been kind of a slow movie watching week
Hmm.
for me. Yeah, I'm like, I rewatch too many films too often.
Same. I do that as
Like way
well.
too often. Like last night was my 10th log of Mad Max Fury Road.
Jesus.
It's like I don't need to be doing that. But yeah, that's pretty much what I've been watching lately. And Top Gun
Mm.
Maverick. I've been on such a big Top Gun Maverick kick lately, which I'm sure you've
We all
seen on
know.
Letterboxd. Yeah, everyone knows. I might watch it again tonight or tomorrow. But I'm loving Top Gun Maverick. So that's kind of been what I've been going through.
Speaking of Ryan Gosling, you just mentioned that you went through his filmography, but have you watched that movie that he directed, Lost River?
No, I did not even know he directed a movie.
Ooh, he did it right after he did Drive,
Okay.
and it kind of carries that same tone of like neon everything. And the score was done by Chromatics and or I think Johnny Jewel specifically. So I think it's something that you would maybe appreciate even just on an aesthetic level. The story isn't the best, but it's pretty nice to
Yeah.
watch.
Yeah, that okay. You said neon and my mind went wild because that's
Same.
that's like one of the biggest reasons why I saw the TV Glow. It's just the whole like neon aesthetic. And then even like, I know you love Fallen Angels and Chunking Express. Like they're not like traditional neon, but they have like that deeper, like darker color grading. So no, I did not know he directed a film. That's kind of interesting.
There you go. On the watch list it goes.
Yeah, of course.
But so coming of age. So let's first define it because I know some people have different specific definitions to what it is. And I'm curious if yours is the same as mine. So in my opinion, I think that the coming of age genre, sure, it can revolve around somebody who's literally coming of age, you know, from one form of maturity to another, as a child to a teenager, what have you. But I also see it as it could be somebody who's older. It could be somebody who's completed college or is transitioning into those early adult years, you know? So I personally think it can go up to maybe late 20s is pushing it, but I feel like it can. But does that line up with yours?
Yeah, pretty much. We actually discussed this on the ReelTok podcast when we were reviewing Sound of Metal, because I think Sound of Metal, Riz Ahmed's character, he has to be like early 30s, late 20s. We were talking like, would we consider that like coming of age? And I think we all kind of came to the agreement of yes. And I would think I would take it even further, where I don't know if there's even like an age limit on coming of age necessarily. I was going to DM you asking this before this episode, but like, would you consider, again, we're going to bring up Wong Kar-wai, would you consider In the Mood for Love a coming of age film?
Oh,
Because like I was really thinking about that narrative, and it's like they're both in like this very like important moment in their life where their lifestyles and mindsets are changing. So like, and in the movie, they're what, like 40s, I would say.
I guess. Yeah, I never thought about it.
So yeah, I think my definition of coming of age aligns with yours, but I think on the age thing, I don't know if there's like a cap for coming of age films, because I think these movies, like, doesn't matter where you are at any point in your life, different films can affect you on such a crazy level, which is why even over the last like 5 years, I think like the coming of age films that I'm like more attracted to are movies where like I am the same age as the main character, which is why I'm like so into coming of age, because I feel like every year I'll have like a different appreciation for another one of the films.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, it all depends, like, as you grow and you change, what you're going to resonate with. It's always going to be different, right? And I guess that's also a reason why I consistently go back to the coming of age genre, because, yeah, it just resonates with me. There's always something to learn. And I don't even feel like a fully formed adult yet. So, I mean, that probably has something to do with it. But so for those of you who are interested in literary criticism, maybe I'm the only one, I don't know. But the coming of age genre can also be referred to as a Bildungsroman. It's a term coined in 1819 by philologist Johann Carl Simon Morgenstern, obviously a German word, and it comes from the words Bildung, which means education, or I guess formed or forming, and Roman, which is novel. Why am I telling you all of this? It's interesting to me, and again, maybe this is only because I studied classical studies in college, but the first example of a coming of age, or Bildungsroman, if you will, George, do you want to guess what it is?
Oh God.
Very first.
First ever?
I said classical studies, so maybe that'll help you.
I know.
It's your people.
Is it really?
Yeah, even more of a hint.
Oh man. This is going to be embarrassing if it's like something obvious that I'm not thinking of right now.
It's not. I didn't realize it, and then when I found out about it, I was like, oh. But if you don't want to guess, I can tell you.
Yeah, okay. I don't even have a thought.
So many consider it to be Homer's Iliad, because even though it's about the Trojan War, it's also Achilles reaching maturity. So I found that interesting. And that could be considered the very first one. So,
which makes sense, but I would have never thought about that.
Neither, ever. But okay, so we got sidetracked. So how are we going to tackle this today? You and I, we're going to go back and forth. Each list are 5 favorite coming of age movies. They don't have to be in a particular order, unless you want them to be. I sure didn't. But that's pretty much it. We're going to explain why we like them. And I also want to point out, these do not have to be the best ever coming of age movies. It's just the ones that you and I happen to resonate with the most. And then at the end, we can give our 5 extra honorable mentions that didn't make the cut. You don't have to be as wordy with those, again, unless you want to. I won't stop you. And if we have some of the same selects, that's totally fine. I have a feeling we're going to have one. I think you know what it is.
I think I know what one you're talking about, and I purposely excluded it from my 5 for that reason, because I think I know exactly which one you're talking about.
I'm so curious. Okay. Well, okay. So I'm going to go first. And I'm so curious if you're going to have these. But my first one is going to be Alfonso Cuarón's 2001 film that I have here, actually, on the Criterion. Y tu mama tambien. I can't believe I almost said Y tu mama tambien.
Yeah.
Um, this gives us an incredible coming of age story of two teenage boys, but we're also presented with an equally fantastic road movie. And even after all of that, it's even more layered, and that's why I love it so much. But I'll explain that in a second. So the movie revolves around two 17-year-old boys, played by Diego Luna and Gael Garcia Bernal, who I'm in love with, besides the point, in Mexico City, and they're very, very sex crazed. I should also note that the film takes place in 1999, and this was during a time of significant political and economic unrest in Mexico. And over the course of the summer break, they decide they're going to go on a cross country road trip. How does this happen? They run into a woman, a Spanish woman, Luisa, at a wedding. And she's older than them. I would place her in her late 20s. George, what do you think? Maybe
I would say,
27?
yeah, I would say
Yeah,
late 20s as
somewhere
well.
there. But anyway, they meet her, and to impress her, they tell her about this gorgeous, secluded beach, which they made up. They invite her to come along with them, and she says no. And then some stuff happens. I'm not going to spoil it, but ultimately she calls them and she's like, let's go. So they're scrambling to now take her to this beach that allegedly doesn't exist. And yeah, it's just a journey for them. They experience so much like love, friendship, the fleeting passage of time. And it's also an exploration of their country and their heritage. So there's themes of classism, there's all this stuff going on. And of course, throughout all of this, they grow up. George, are you a fan of this movie?
Yeah, I love this movie. I put together like a list of 15 movies, five of which are my
Mm-hmm.
favorites, and then 10 like honorable mentions that I want to mention. And one of my HMs is Y tu mama tambien. I love this. I had only seen it for the first time only a couple months ago because we did it as a like a bonus review for our podcast. So I was very happy we picked it because it had been on my watch list forever. But I love this movie. It's so condensed. It's so small scale. It's literally just getting from point A to point B with some of the most inspired dialogue and conversations you'll kind of ever hear in film and ever just have the privilege of laying witness to. And it's tackling so much and it's doing all of this in a very sincere way. Like you said, love, friendship, sexuality, maturity. It's kind of like hitting every single point on something you would expect to be within a coming of age film. And it's doing everything very just effortlessly. It's very composed film with three just infectious, lovable lead performances that I absolutely love. I'm only putting two and two together right now that Maribel is the mother in the Flash movie, which I don't even know if you've seen, but I'm just noticing that. But yeah, I love Y tu mama tambien. It's also just like a main like one thing that like attracts me to coming of age films is just like a good vibe, and this is really
Mm.
just like it's just a fun time. You truly do feel like you're like in the backseat of this car with these three just driving to essentially nowhere really and just listening in on their conversations, and you kind of watch this movie and you're like, I wish I were there. I wish I could like just be a part of this conversation, whether or not you're just listening and just they're providing insight or if you have anything meaningful to say. It's just like one of those like good vibe movies that I'm just very attracted to.
And I mean, I think you should give it a rewatch soon as well because there's so much more that you pick up on. I just rewatched it the other day, and yeah, just the tone was different at least a little bit because you know what's going to happen. And I started paying attention to all the stuff that's happening in the background too. So, what I love about the film is that it fools you at the start. You start it, you think you're going to get that sex comedy kind of like American Pie or the other stuff that was coming out in the, late 90s, early 2000s, but then it grows and it transforms and you get something so heartfelt. As you were saying, it explores also that like machismo culture in Latin America, has stereotypes involving sexuality, and there's so much to it that just breaks all of that away. And like I said, it's also that exploration of Mexican identity and culture. And I think what's really cool about the movie is what the camera does. So Emmanuel Lubezki was the cinematographer, and he has that handheld camera that carefully glides away from the plot itself. So you'll see our characters, and the camera goes and it shows you what's going on behind, like the cooks in the kitchen or the people on the highway that our leads are kind of missing, but that I think Alfonso Cuaron, the director, thinks it's so important for us to see. So I think it's a coming of age movie. It explores that, but it also explores so much more. And yeah, that's my pick for my first one.
Yeah, I need to rewatch it for sure. It's been too long. And again, I rewatch movies too many times to not rewatch this one.
Fair.
All right, my first movie, and I'm going to make a quick disclaimer. I'm excluding comic book movies. So, like, Into the
Oh.
Spider Verse, Spider Man 2. Obviously, I love these movies, but I wanted to keep this like traditional coming of age. And I also talk about those movies way too often. So, my first pick is Almost Famous, Cameron Crowe's
Mm.
2000 film starring Billy Crudup, Frances McDormand, Kate Hudson, Jason Lee. Basically, this 15-year-old kid gets hired by Rolling Stones to take a trip with this up and coming rock band and write an article about them. And that's pretty much the entire synopsis of the movie. As he's going along, he's trying to get interviews with them. He's just kind of experiencing life on the road with a 70s rock band. I love this movie with all of my heart. It has some of my favorite lines of dialogue, something as simple as "it's all happening" to something as more deep and thought provoking, like the only true currency in this bankrupt world is what you can share with someone else when you're uncool. It has so many line drops like that just like really hit me to my core. It's also just this massive love letter to everything. It's a love letter to being free. It's a love letter to growing up. It's a love letter to your identity and finding yourself and just making something of yourself. Philip Seymour Hoffman's character says something along the lines of, you know, being uncool in an imperfect world. And it's just little things like that that really stick with you. And then, like I just said, like it's just the vibe, the aesthetic, that rock and roll backdrop, that 70s rock and roll aesthetic. I think Kate Hudson is so incredible in this movie. She is so kind hearted. She is just such a perfect comfort companion. And this is one of my favorite comfort movies out there. But I love this movie. Everything about it, I love. There's a scene, not really a spoiler at all, but there's just a scene when they're all on a bus driving and they're singing to Elton John's Tiny Dancer. And that's the whole scene for like 2.5 minutes. And it gets a tear out of me because it's just so sweet and it's so heartfelt. I love this movie. I really do. Like I said, it just has some of my favorite sequences in coming of age filmmaking. And I feel like it's like such a weird movie to be attracted to because I do think there are other coming of age films out there like Y Tu Mama Tambien that they might be like thematically richer, but just the whole vibe and aesthetic of Almost Famous, I absolutely love and adore. It's not necessarily, if I were to rank these, it might be number one now that I'm like looking at
Mm.
this list. But yeah, I love this movie so much. It's one of my favorites ever, not even just like ever, not even coming of age exclusive.
I kept. When's the last time I watched this? It came out in what, 2001
2000, yeah.
or 2000? Yeah. So I think I saw that in high school because right now, looking back at it, I remember loving it when I watched it for the first time. But yeah, now looking back at it, I don't remember anything besides Kate Hudson. Like that's the only thing that's kind of stuck out in my mind.
That's a
So,
good thing to remember because she truly is. She is just, it's like, I don't even know how to describe it. It's such a reserved performance. Like she's not
mhm.
doing anything flashy, but she's just like, for those who haven't watched, she basically plays like a groupie on in this movie, and she like follows the band around. She's like their biggest fan. But again, it's not a flashy performance. It's truly just
Mhm.
like one of the most comforting performances ever because she's also kind of playing this mentor, this 15-year-old kid in this movie, while he's like kind of in love with her. So it's such a fun and comforting dynamic, and she's amazing. I watched it for the first time not too long ago, actually,
Oh
probably
wow.
like a year ago, and I was in bed by myself crying watching this movie. I love this thing so much.
Oh man, that's me every weekend. I love crying and watching
Yeah.
movies. That's just it's my jam. Um, but for me, next up, I'm gonna go with a classic. I had to do it, and that's Francois Truffaut's 1959 film, The 400 Blows. A lot different in tone than what George just had. But I love this film. I had the pleasure of watching it on the big screen years ago now, but that was my first experience with it. And I mean, man, what a way to watch that movie for the first time. Just visually, it's so innovative as well. Huge part of the French New Wave movement, but we're not talking about the French New Wave movement today. So getting back to the coming of age, it's just crazy to think of that this was Truffaut's feature film debut because he just depicts these coming of age motifs so well and he presents the story so well that it just blows my mind. Like, this is something that another filmmaker would have made like 2, 3 films in, not their first one. But anyway, it depicts the life of a schoolboy, Antoine, played by Jean-Pierre Léaud. And Truffaut would make 4 more movies with the character of Antoine, but this is the first one. It's the earliest stages of his life, so that's why I think it fits the topic of our conversation today. But Antoine lives in Paris in the 1950s. He just cannot catch a break. I would say he comes from a pretty messed up family. So that's his home life. And then at school, he's tormented by his teachers and by fellow classmates. Like I said, this kid just cannot catch a break. And I would say that this is a boy who, he wants love and he yearns for that acceptance, but wherever he turns, it's not there. And it's heartbreaking to see someone who seems to think that he's a burden for everybody else. And so we watch Antoine's life and progression and the conflicts that occur. He gets more into a life of crime. So, along with being a character study and a coming of age, I think it's also a film that really shows the injustices in France at the time and how society treated juvenile offenders. And it turns out that the 400 Blows is semi autobiographical for Truffaut. Did you know this, George?
I did not know.
Yeah, so he actually had a similar upbringing to Antoine. And I can say that another day. But for those of you who are interested, there's a phenomenal biography on Truffaut's life called Francois Truffaut, The Lost Secret. So I highly suggest picking that up if you want to know more about him and his background, et cetera, et cetera. But so Truffaut picked Léaud for the role, who was 14 at the time, out of 60 boys, because he could tell how much he wanted the role. And I think he dubbed Léaud, I think I wrote this down, an antisocial loner on the brink of rebellion. And when you watch his performance, it really does seem that way. It's so authentic. And I also highly suggest finding the screen test online. You can look it up on YouTube where you see this boy and the screen test that he gave. And it truly is the embodiment of Antoine, the character. And so Truffaut also encouraged him to improvise lines. And the reason why he did this was because he wanted to, quote, not depict adolescence from the usual viewpoint of sentimental nostalgia, but to show it as the painful experience that it is. And that is just it. I think that this movie portrays that misunderstood period in a child or teenager's life where no one's listening to you and you're just trying to make it through these years. So that's my second pick. George, do you like this movie?
I've only seen it once, unfortunately. I'm a little like ignorant to Truffaut's filmography. This is the only Truffaut film I've seen. That's really sad that
Mm-hmm.
now I'm finding out that this is like loosely based on his life. I don't know if you were watching me while you were talking, but I was kind of like, my face kind of shut down.
So sorry.
That is really sad because you're absolutely the whole purpose of this film is like kind of like invisibility and how just like
Mm-hmm.
no matter what you do, like this poor kid just like feels like he's not important to anyone and he feels
Yeah.
like truly invisible. Maybe not for a podcast, but there's Seth and I have talked about the ending and I thought something else was going to happen, which is even more depressing than what actually happened. But yeah, that's really sad that this is about like loosely based on Truffaut's life
Mm-hmm.
because it really is just kind of like this massive ode to like finding yourself and dare I say coming of age and like truly understanding who you are in this world and like understanding your place in everyone's life. And this poor kid Anton is just having such a hard time doing so. He's mentally drained and it's I think it's even sadder because I don't know if young children that age understand what being mentally drained truly feels like. So he's probably just
Mm-hmm.
experiencing this loneliness and this invisibility and not even knowing like where it's stemming from. But yeah, I need to rewatch this movie and I definitely need to dive into Truffaut's filmography. But on first watch only a couple months ago, I've definitely enjoyed this one.
Good. Well, I'm glad to hear that. It's a good one to start off with when it comes to Truffaut. So you did good.
I
You did
didn't
good
know it
with
was
what you
his
did.
debut, honestly. So I
Yeah.
guess I like unintentionally started at the perfect spot.
There you go. Amazing. But go for your next one if you're ready.
All right, my number two, and I have to mention this man's name because he is probably one of my three favorite filmmakers, and I'm gonna pick a Richard Linklater film, and I'm gonna
Mm.
take Everybody Wants Some. This is a big theme for me with coming of age is comfort. You know, just like always, almost famous. Everybody Wants Some is just the ultimate just guys being dudes movie. It follows this baseball team. They are in preseason. I believe the movie takes place like the week or two before classes start. So they have no responsibilities. Their only focus is drinking and partying and talking to women and dancing and clubbing and practicing. And it really is like on the surface, there's no plot really. It's literally like a camera is truly just following around this baseball team while they're in preseason. It's a bunch of 18 to 22-year-olds that have zero responsibility. And it is just such good vibes. Dragged out scenes of them in the car just singing for no reason. It has nothing to do with the plot. They're just
Okay.
singing. It is just, it's such good vibes. I love Glenn Powell. Like, truly, between Everybody Wants Some, obviously Top Gun Maverick, I've seen Hitman, and I think that's his best performance to date. Even in Anyone But You, I think he's like such a star. He's such like an old fashioned, truly charismatic movie star. And prior to having seen Hitman, this was my favorite performance of his. And then on top of just like the guys being dudes, you have Zoe Deutsch, who is just this beautiful, charming presence who doesn't matter what movie she's in, she's just always going to light up the room, and I love her. And then just the whole supporting cast, Blake Jenner, well, Blake Jenner is technically the lead. Glenn Powell is the supporting cast. Ryan Guzman, Tyler Hoechlin. It's just everything comes together perfectly to just create this like just good vibes experience. It's hard to like talk about this film like sophisticatedly because it's truly just there's no like deep thematic elements here the way
Yeah.
there is in like the 400 blows and Tu Mama Tambien. It truly is just guys being dudes just having a good time. And I can't even tell you how many times I've played this movie and just for like the first 20 minutes where they're just like introducing each other to themselves and they're just having a good time moving into school. It's such a good movie, and I really love it. And Richard Linklater, I could have gone with Dazed and Confused. I would even
Anything.
consider each of the Before trilogy films coming of
Oh.
age. School of Rock, obviously,
Mhm.
Apollo 10 and a half. I could have picked any Linklater films for coming of age. Boyhood, how could I forget
Mhm.
Boyhood? But I'm going to go with Everybody Wants Some because that is probably my most rewatched Linklater film.
I'm embarrassed to say I haven't seen that yet. I
Ah,
actually haven't seen that
it's
yet.
so
I
good.
know.
It's like it's 2 hours of just a good time. Like if you're ever, I hate saying this about movies I love, but it applies for Everybody Wants Some. If you're ever in the mood to truly just turn off your brain, this is the movie to do it for. Like it's such a turn your brain off. It's like again, this is such a knock to the movie, but it really isn't. It lacks intelligence. It's literally just
Mhm.
guys being dudes. It's just such a good time, and I love it so much.
Listen, you need that sometimes. I feel like if I watch too many, highbrow movies back to back, I need to shut off my brain. Like Harry came on a few months ago for a episode on our Nick Cage favorite movies. So that was just like a week of watching just Nick
Yeah,
Cage, and it just reset my brain. It was beautiful.
that's too
Um,
much. Yeah.
ah,
After I saw the TV glow like 2 days ago, I
mhm.
called my mom the following day and I was telling her about the movie, and she's like, George, why do you watch so many depressing movies? Just watch something happy. And I'm like, I do, I promise.
Sometimes.
And this is it.
Ah,
This is that movie to put on if you want to like break up a string of like mentally draining films.
amazing. I may do that tonight then. I'm not
Oh,
even
it's so
joking.
good. I highly
So
recommend. I could not
good.
recommend more.
Amazing. Okay, well, I'll let you know what I think after I check it out. But for my next one, I'm going to go with a movie that portrays slightly that later sort of coming of age or age demographic. And this one occurs after our lead has graduated from college. So that's The Graduate by Mike Nichols from 1967. It's actually based on a 1963 book by Charles Webb of the same name. And to me, I just think this is remarkable that it came out in the late 60s, yet it still manages to capture that postgraduate aimlessness that so many of us feel when we finish school and we're suddenly left with that reality of what now? And it's a very isolating feeling, in my opinion, at least. And it's that also that feeling where you don't want to conform to society standards or become like your parents, which at that time was even more prominent in the 60s with that generational divide. But at the same time, you're just left with this sort of sense of alienation, aimlessness, that sort of thing. That's universal, don't you think?
Yeah. I think this is like one of those coming of age films where I don't even think it matters what point in life you are. Like, you don't need to be a college graduate for this to like resonate with you. Everyone at some point in their life just feels that way. Like, you don't know where you're going. You feel lonely. You feel lost. It's not even like this does not apply strictly to a college graduate. This is anyone,
Everything.
anywhere. Yeah.
all the time.
Yeah.
Um, but I would assume a lot of us have seen The Graduate already. I would hope so. So I'm not going to give a super in-depth explanation besides kind of summing it up and saying that Dustin Hoffman plays Benjamin Braddock, who, as we just said, graduated from college, doesn't know what he's going to do next, even though he's being berated, literally berated by his family and his family's friends as to what he's going to do next. And so at the same time, this opens up a love triangle with Mrs. Robinson, which we can cue a soundbite of that Simon and Garfunkel song for socials, but also the wife, or she's the wife of his father's law partner, I think it is,
Mhm.
and then her daughter, Elaine. So that is the love triangle, and that's all I'm going to say plot wise. But as I was mentioning, and as George mentioned, it just captures that sort of uncertainty, that suffocation of not knowing what you want to do, and people are accosting you about it. And that's exhausting. And at the time this came out, The Graduate was actually quite monumental for the new Hollywood movement, which was just emerging. And it was really daring and radical. And Benjamin's decisions in this movie totally went against what the older generation and this suburban American cookie cutter lifestyle was doing. And so I think The Graduate captures this also well. This coming of age, this moment in American history as well. And I think personally, the ending is quite clever because even after all that rebellion happens, again, I'm not going to spoil it, you get this extended long shot with Benjamin's face and somebody else's. And it just leaves you feeling with this, it leaves you thinking, everything that's happened, I've gotten what I've wanted, but do I feel better? And I think it really captures that sort of feeling of, well, what now? Very well. So that is my pick.
I love that you're trying not to spoil a movie from 60 years ago. We on the Real Talk podcast, we're like, this movie came out like 10 years ago. If you haven't seen it by now, that's your fault.
I know. I started saying the last portion and then I'm like, look, Benjamin, and not gonna say.
Surprisingly, I feel like all these films we're talking about I've seen for the first time within like the last year, which
Well,
is
there you
awesome because
go.
they're all like fresh in my head. But it was either Tyler or Seth who asked me like, "Do you know how the movie ends?" And I'm like, honestly, no. Like, I've somehow like I obviously, spoilers, sorry, I had seen like the clipping of them sitting on the
Yeah.
bus, but like it's so out of context, I had no idea what was
Hmm.
happening. But yeah, I love this movie. I'm actually upset I forgot it on my honorable mentions list
Oh
because it
no.
definitely would have been there. But it's such, like we said, it's so, movie came out almost 60 years ago, and there are these themes and these, you know, things of loneliness and just feeling lost that just they impact you 60 years after this film was released, as well as, like we said, at any point in time. I think this is just, this narrative is so sincere, but it's also very depressed at the same time, which I
Hmm.
think just makes for such an interesting and very relatable experience. Because again, I think everyone's just felt that. I think everyone at one point in their life has felt lost, has felt like maybe they're not on the right path. Maybe they don't even know what they want to do with their lives. But yeah, I love this film. I think Dustin Hoffman, I truly, truly, truly think this is one of, if not the best performance in a coming of age film. I think he is hilarious, even though I don't think the film is necessarily hilarious,
Yes.
but he carries himself, and the way he portrays this, like, this pain and, like, I don't want to say suffering, but this guy who has so much weight on his shoulders and doesn't necessarily know how to relieve himself on it, while also trying to just like remain cool and act like
Hmm.
nothing is happening. I think he's just he it's it's so brilliant because it's so relatable. It's like it's something I felt in my life where you just feel like the world is collapsing on you, but like you don't want it. You don't want people around you to know that. And I think Dustin Hoffman just nails that very emotionally raw performance. And then obviously the final sequence, which I won't get into, spoilers. It's just brilliant. It's so good. It's so memorable. It is such a powerful way to end a film. It's love. It's uncertain anxiety. It's Jesus Christ. It's technically beautiful. This film. Simon and Garfunkel are just incredible. I don't know if you've ever heard the cover of Sound of Silence from
No.
Disturbed. It's like
No.
a yeah, it's insane. It's like
What?
I don't listen to that band at all, but this one
Hmm.
cover of that song, it's so raw and so emotional. And then one thing I've gone, and I don't know, like I don't know about you, but especially in coming of age films, I love to pay attention to the soundtrack, especially the lyrics. And I was
Hmm.
thinking about this with I Saw the TV Glow because there are a couple original songs in that movie, and the lyrics are so just they're so important and they're so spot on. Where I feel like sometimes a soundtrack can go over your head, like kind of in like the Guardians of the Galaxy movies, where they're just kind of there to be fun. Like Sound of Silence in this movie is so torturous just because of like how devastating the lyrics are, which just adds to this movie. I love this movie so much. I'm sorry, I keep ranting about these movies, but I
No,
love
I
them all
love it.
so much.
That's why I wanted you to come on. Would you say, because I kind of rushed it when I was explaining it, and it took me a few watches to feel this way. Would you say that the ending is depressing? Yes or no? Because first I thought no, and then on rewatch I was like, holy shit, yes.
I don't know about I got more of like a hopeful energy because
Oh,
while he's on, so again, I only saw it once.
yeah.
So this is the outlook of someone who's only seen a movie once. So while he's on the bus, he kind of like gives like this very brief like smile, which doesn't
Oh.
necessarily tell me that like he's found himself or that he
Mm-hmm.
understands something. It just means he's won something small in his life. He's won. I don't think the ending solves his problem of like
Mm-hmm.
what job he's going to get or how is he going to make his parents proud. But from the perspective of a college graduate who just has nothing going for them, the smallest wins probably mean the world. And that was one of those wins for him. Obviously, it's going to stir up an interesting relationship between, Miss Robinson and her
Oh
husband.
God.
So I would love to see a sequel just for that exact relationship to unfold. But I don't know. I never got like a depressed vibe from the
Mm-hmm.
ending. It was more so like hopeful, but
Huh.
it wasn't like a real big win. It was just like the small wins matter, and this was one of those small wins for him.
I like that take. I like the small wins take. I'm gonna
I
have to
could be
rewatch it
completely
again.
wrong. Yeah,
Um,
if I rewatch it, I could completely change my opinion.
I think it also depends like what sort of mood you're in when you're watching it. I don't know about you, but if it's an ambiguous ending, there'll be some days where I'll just be like, this was so negative, and then I can rewatch the same thing in a week and think it's the most beautiful thing ever. So
Yeah, completely agree. Yeah.
yeah. Well, what's your next one?
All right, my next one, I'm gonna go with. Well, I say that as if I'm undecided. I know exactly what I'm gonna go with. I'm gonna go with The Perks of Being a Wallflower.
Oh, nice.
Truly, one of my favorite, one of the most detailed and important explorations of trauma, of isolation, of mental health. It is a beautiful reminder. It is a lesson in just making sure you have an outlet, making sure you have people to talk to. And again, this is just like The Graduate, where this movie takes place in high school, but it is so relevant to any age demographic. It doesn't matter what you're going through. It is such an important look at loneliness and mental health and just the importance of taking care of yourself. It goes beyond having someone to talk to. It's just taking care of yourself. I think this movie is absolutely devastating, and every time I watch it, I feel like it hits harder and harder just as I kind of like go through life and experience, different things as I get older. I feel like this movie just becomes more relevant just as the years go by. This poor lead actor, well, the character, not the actual actor, brilliantly played by Logan Lerman, by the way. Our lead character is just he's going through life with this just, I don't, God, it's going to make me like tear up thinking about it. He's going through life basically thinking he has no one on his side, thinking he's got no one to talk to, when in reality he has so many outlets, but he's so trapped in this state of mind of being lonely, and it's very clearly affecting him. It is just a beautiful movie about internalizing your pain and your trauma and your grief. I think it's one of the most important movies we have when it comes to mental health, just because of all of the movies I'll talk about on this episode. I think this is the one I treat the most as a lesson to be learned, as opposed to like an experience in film. I don't know if that made sense. But yeah, I love this movie. Just like Almost Famous, there are just some of my favorite one-liners in this movie that just deal with mental health. One of my favorites, it was, she wasn't bitter, she was sad, but it was a hopeful kind of sad, the kind of sad that just takes time. So it's just like Almost Famous, where like there's these like little like, just, I always wonder when people write these movies if they realize how hard some of these like small one sentence one liners are going to hit people.
Mhm.
And this movie is just full of them. I adore this movie so much. It is truly one of my favorites. Again, not only in the coming of age space, but just film in general. So yeah, that's one of my favorites. That's my third pick.
That's another one, same with Almost Famous, that I haven't seen in literal years, but I remember loving it. So, I mean, the way you're talking about it right now, I really want to revisit it because you're right. I do remember it having those just phenomenal one-liners that are just like hitting you right in the chest. So, yeah, I'm going to check that out. Do you know what it's streaming on?
No.
No?
Hold
Or
on.
it would
I
be
can
different,
quickly check.
probably. Yeah, because you're in the
Oh
States, I'm in
yeah,
Canada.
true. Yeah,
I
for
feel
me, it's
like,
available to rent on YouTube or Amazon.
oh, okay, so that's probably the same with me too.
Yeah, I'd
But
imagine.
anyway. So next up for me, I'm honestly like I'm starting to feel a bit embarrassed. You're going for all these like super approachable movies that everyone's going to want to watch and I'm like, "Oh, this highbrow movie from 1959."
No,
But you know what? That's fine. That's fine. We have
that's what
variety
you
here.
love. Yeah, that's
It's
okay.
true. It's
Exactly.
true.
We have variety.
It's variety. Spice of life. So this one for me I actually watched relatively recently, just last week I think. It's part of a trilogy called the Apu trilogy. And the one I picked is the middle, the second movie in the trilogy. It's called Aparajito. And this is by Satyajit Ray. Came out in 1956, again with the 50s. And these films are based on novels by a Bengali writer. I'm going to butcher the name. Bebop. Oh, be man, I practiced this too. Be, I wish Seth was here. He's so good at these. Bebotch. I'm not even gonna. A Bengali writer based off a book. Movie came out in 1956. And I'm so sorry. And you could honestly look at this entire trilogy as a massive coming of age tale as it charts the life of our lead, Apu, from a child all the way to adulthood. But the reason I picked Parajito versus the first film, Pather Panchali, or the last one, The World of Apu, is because the middle one deals with him going from a child, I would say around 7, to all the way to him starting college. So that to me is, yeah, it's a coming of age. And this one deals with, or it starts off where the first movie left off, which is with Apu and his parents moving from their small village to Benares in 1920. And then from there, they moved to another small village and then finally to Kolkata. So, as Apu navigates these significant life changes that I'm not going to spoil, we witness how his world gradually expands. So, along with being a phenomenal journey of Apu's transformation into adulthood, it's also this glorious story of his relationship to his mother and the heartbreaking process of him realizing that to grow and evolve, he must leave behind his mother and she must be abandoned. And for those of you who have seen Ozu's Tokyo Story, you'll know what I mean when this is the sort of film that makes you want to go and just hug your parents and never let go. It's just this devastating reminder of the passage of time and when you're selfish because you're young and you just don't know better. And as an adult watching this, I can't fully fault that sort of childlike selfishness because I find it relatable. Am I making sense?
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
Absolutely.
So Satyajit Ray in himself is a legend. He was a super influential, super influential Indian filmmaker, particularly when it comes to the Bengali area. And his first film was actually Pather Panchali, which is the first in this trilogy. And he was inspired by Italian neorealism, notably the Bicycle Thieves. And you can see that he brought elements of that to this trilogy and movements from Italian neo or not movements, elements from Italian neorealism to this trilogy. So, according to Ray, I find this interesting. Critics at the time complained that Aparigito was shot through this like documentarian's eye, and yet that's what I love about it. It's just this naturalistic approach where you're watching this daily living. And it just hooks you. It feels like you're watching this cycle of life and this boy's cycle of life and his coming of age. And I love it. So, yeah, George, I really hope you check out this trilogy eventually someday.
I need to. Question for you, actually. When
Mm,
it comes to coming of age, do you prefer like that, like a Boyhood, where it's like a full kind of like, where it's like it spans years, like it's a full,
mm.
like going from age 7, I think you just said, all the way to
Yeah.
college? Or do you prefer something more like relaxed and intimate, like a Perks of Being a
Uh,
Wallflower that takes place across just like one summer?
I think it depends. I think it depends. It depends what I'm after. Like my next pick after this one, it's gonna be more of that like Perks of Being a
Hmm.
Wallflower, where it's like a short time frame of somebody's life. I find that more relatable. But then I also like watching somebody's progression from a child to adulthood and seeing how they change, because I find that also relatable as well. Because I feel like I was an okay kid. I mean, I was okay, but I had my mistakes, and I had these sort of selfish things that I used to do. So I do like seeing that come through in a movie as well, because it does kind of make me feel seen, you know?
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. I think I'm more attracted to like what you said, like just relaxed, very like
Hmm.
small space in terms of time frame, because I do think that's just a little more like relatable when you like pull a piece of someone's life out and like you feel like you're like watching just a year of this person's life. Just makes it a lot more relatable, I think, for me.
No, that totally makes sense. Yeah. Now that I'm looking at it, I'm actually surprised that two of these that I picked are more so expanded
Yeah,
versus
I
that
was
little
that
chunk of
that's why
time.
I asked, because all of mine are like in a
Yeah.
very small time frame, and I was thinking like I love Boyhood, but like what other coming of age films out there are there that like span that much time
Hmm.
that I like truly love the way I love like an Almost Famous.
Yeah, I don't know. I feel like, yeah, Boyhood and this Apu trilogy, but I can't think of anything else that really does span somebody's
Yeah.
like practically entire life. But yeah, what's your last one? Is this the last one?
No, this is my four.
Oh,
All right.
four. Okay.
So my four, I'm gonna go with Sing Street.
Mm.
Again, I say I'm gonna go with as if it's a last minute decision.
Like we
I knew I
didn't
was gonna
plan
say
this.
Sing Street. Yeah, this is. Oh my god, I could write a 10-page dissertation on this film and how much all I want to do is grow up in 1980s Dublin and be a part of this friend group. Whole movie, so like just very high level. It's this kid growing up in Dublin in the 1980s. He kind of has, I don't want to say like a very strained life, but there are aspects of his life that just are impacting his home life, his mental health, some friendships, his relationships with his brother and his father. And while all that's going on, he simultaneously falls. That's how excited I'm getting. I'm knocking over my microphone right now. He simultaneously falls for this girl, and in order to impress her, he starts a band, which, one, awesome. Coolest thing you could do to impress a girl is start a band.
It's true.
But then this movie unfolds, and it's like you're watching kind of two things go on at once. You're watching this kid who half of him is so happy. He's with his buds. He's starting a band. Soundtrack absolutely bangs, by the way. It's so good. One of my favorite soundtracks out there. And he's just having a good time while he's trying to impress this girl. And he's living a life. He's living a life you would expect I think they're like 13, 14, 15 in this movie. He's living a life you would expect a teenager to live. Just having fun, being stupid with your friends, trying to impress girls, having crushes, things like that. And then on the other half, you kind of dive into his personal life. And he has a very, I want to say, distant relationship with his parents. His brother is kind of this immature presence who doesn't necessarily guide him on the right direction. But this is where I also think this movie is brilliant. His brother is a side character, one of my favorite character arcs in film. He goes from, spoilers, he goes from pretty much being like this degenerate guy to just being this cleaned up man who like wants to get his life together. So there's just this whole movie is just like there's so much attention to detail, not only for our main character but for all of like the side characters, and I love that about it. It really feels like not a minute is wasted going by. Sometimes you have like side characters in movies and you spend time with them and you're like, I don't really care about this character. Simply not the case in Sing Street. Everyone is so cool. They're so nerdy and it's so cool and it's so cute and the soundtrack is so good. I truly love this movie. Obviously I wouldn't be talking about it if I didn't. And also just back to what I said about Everybody Wants Some. It's just such good vibes. It truly is like there are just some sequences where you're truly just you feel like you're watching reality TV where these kids they I don't know how children act this well, but the chemistry they have, they truly feel like a friend group that have been involved in each other's lives for years, which when it comes to a coming of age film, I truly think like that chemistry between our characters is so important because I think coming of age above all, just I think it needs to be believable in a sense because at least for me, what makes coming of age so impactful is just how relatable it can be. So the chemistry these characters share is just it's unlike anything I've ever seen in a coming of age film. And there's so many of them, which makes it more impressive. But I love this movie. I really do. I'm gonna avoid spoilers because I don't believe have you seen it?
No, I was
Oh,
gonna say I'm
oh.
so embarrassed. I haven't seen it. So it's a huge blind spot for me.
All right. So tonight you're watching Everybody Wants Some, and then
Yes.
right after it, you're
Yes.
watching Sing Street.
Yes.
'Cause
I actually
Sing Street
will.
is so good. Yeah, you need
I
to. It's
I
so
need to.
good.
Especially after I went through this Apu trilogy and my life has just been like ruined, gutted. So
Yeah,
yes.
this one, there's a lot of it is thematically deep. You know, you have this distant relationship with his father. You have his brother who's like just on the wrong path for half the film, but like it never feels like depressing, even though it touches on some like traditionally depressing things. Like it never feels like depressing. I think that's just because of like how good like his like the stuff with his friends are, just how happy it makes you feel. But yeah, this is such a great movie. Obviously, I highly recommend it.
I love it. I think this is the longest one that you chatted about. So
Oh,
maybe I'll
it's
even
so
watch
good.
this first. I don't know.
God, I need to rewatch it. I think it's been a couple of weeks.
A couple of weeks. Amazing. So for my last one, do you want to guess what it is? I feel like you know.
Okay, is this the one you thought would overlap
Yes.
between us? It's got to be Cinema Paradiso, right?
No.
Oh, really? Wait,
No.
don't tell me. Don't tell me. Hold on. Is it not Cinema Paradiso?
No. That one's I'll cheat and I'll say that's an honorable mention. See, half point.
Is it Lady Bird?
No.
Then
Close.
maybe it is my five is Francis Ha. Is that
So
your
is
five?
mine. Yeah.
Oh, okay. All right. I really thought it was going to be Cinema Paradiso. That's why I
Wow.
excluded it. Yeah. Okay. All right. So I
No.
was
No, no,
very
no.
wrong.
Yo,
Okay.
no, I knew it was gonna be this one. No, so I love Francis Ha. It came out 2012, notably written by
Hmm.
Baumbach and Greta Gerwig. I honestly think this is my favorite script of theirs, even his or hers. Anything that they've done, I love this. I love the script. I love the movie. I love that whenever I revisit this movie, the older I get, it still hits. I just watched it a few weeks ago and it hit just the same. So I'm not even gonna, I feel like everyone's seen this movie, or I would hope so. I'm not even gonna get into the plot. But the reason why I love this movie so much is the fact that I don't know if I've ever related to a female character more than Gerwig's Frances. Just that awkward, again, aimlessness in your mid to late 20s. I think she's actually in her late 20s. I could be wrong, but I think so. But it's that feeling where a lot of us feel this way, where we're adults but we're not, and we still don't have things figured out, and we're led to believe that things are going to make sense at this point of our lives, and they just don't. And you take things day by day, and your friendships are changing, as are your career aspirations or job prospects or love potentials. There's just everything is in flux, and you're just trying to stay afloat and do your best. I think this movie portrays all of that with humor that's very relatable as well. Like, I talk to some of my friends just how Frances talks to her friends. And yeah, it's just the sensation of waking up and trying again until maybe one day things don't suck as much and maybe they finally start getting easier. So Yeah, that's kind of for me. I'm not even going to touch on New York in this movie because I know you will, George. That's your domain. But yeah, that's my final pick.
Yeah, same final pick as me. Honestly, I guess I'm so shocked about that. I really was like, she's got Cinema Paradiso will be one of
Nope.
hers. But I'm so, obviously I'm so happy it's Frances Ha. I like you said, I think this is Bombeck's best script, and that's obviously saying something because of
Hmm.
how perfect Marriage Story is. But I love this for every reason you said, and then on top of that, obviously there's the New York City backdrop, which just makes it so relatable. But also, there are so many movies. Obviously, the number of movies that take place in New York is millions, infinity. This movie just like I think captures the New York City experience better than just anything. And I don't know if that's because I am in Francis's age demographic. Like maybe I'll look back on this movie when I'm like 40 or 50 and think differently of it. But because I'm in her age demographic, I think this movie captures just the experience of being in New York City, even if you're not like, even if you can't relate to Francis as a character as being like, you know, this dancer or whatever she's going through in life, you can always relate to a character that's just that feels like just I don't want to say lonely, but just feels like there's just so much going on, so like a chaotic life in this massive chaotic city. And I think this movie really just addresses New York just perfectly. It captures that vibe and the essence so well, which is one of the biggest reasons why I'm attracted to it, and one of the biggest reasons why whenever I can't sleep at night, I put Frances Ha on because
Me too.
I want to hear the sounds of the city, even though I could just open my window. I just play this movie. But yeah, I love this the same way I feel about Dustin Hoffman in The Graduate. I think Greta Gerwig and Frances Ha might be my favorite female performance in a coming of age film. And again, that's saying a lot given how much I just praised Kate Hudson in Almost Famous, because obviously I love her as well. But yeah, I'm so happy this is in your top five. That was such a curveball, but like the best type of curveball I could have ever expected. And I keep looking at these five films in order, and I don't know how I would rank them, but Almost Famous and Frances Ha would be like my one and two, and just on any given day, I could put one of them at one and the other at two. But yeah, I love Frances Ha. I really do. Everything from the writing, the performances, New York City, it all comes together to just create one of the most comforting movies, one of the most relatable mid-20s movies I think we've ever seen.
Absolutely. No, I completely agree with you. And it always leaves me with that feeling of, if Frances can keep trying, then so can I, because so much happens
Exactly.
to her in that movie. It's
Yeah.
brutal. But yeah, so I think I listed my five, you listed your five. Do you want to give
Mhm.
me your first honorable mention?
Yeah, I think I'd be doing a disservice to myself. And you actually mentioned this film earlier in the episode, American Pie.
Oh, nice. I love American.
Love this fucking movie so much. It's so stupid. It
Yep.
is so cheesy and corny and silly and all of the synonyms of those words. But I just love it. It's so much fun. It makes me laugh every time I watch it. It truly like it gets me to laugh every single time. I think some sequences are so absurd, but I think it also like beyond its absurdity and its corniness, I really do think it captures like that high school, end of high school, summer into college life so well, where like all the guys want to do is talk to women. All the women want to do is get ready for college. They just want to have a good time. They want to be free in like their last summer of freedom before they go to college. So like beyond the corniness of the movie, I really do think it captures like I guess high school to college, that middle summer life very, very like sincerely and very well. Even though there are obviously some really dumb sequences. Like the movie's dumb, there's no doubt about it, but I love it so much, and it is one of my most rewatched movies ever. So I feel like
Wow.
I'd be doing such a disservice to like myself to not mention American Pie.
Yeah, I mean, listen, I started my Letterboxd account, what, maybe in 2019. So I haven't logged it more than just like the initial log that you make when
Yeah.
you're doing all your rankings. But before 2019, I would say that was probably one of my most rewatched movies as well. I adore that movie. It's a huge gripe of mine that movies like that I feel will just never get made anymore.
Yeah.
They're just so outrageous, but so much fun. The pie scene, the famous pie scene, is
Like it's
so
so
good.
iconic, but it's
I
so
know.
stupid.
It's so
Like you just
stupid.
can't help but not laugh at this movie.
I remember
Uh,
watching it the first time. My parents actually rented it from like Blockbuster, one of those video rental stores, and I was like peering from the corner because they wouldn't let me watch it with them. So that was my very first experience with it. But I love that movie. For me, I guess, yeah, I may as well go for Cinema Paradiso. As you were saying, that was going to be one
mhm.
of my honorable mentions from 1988. Along with being a fantastic coming of age story, I also think it's probably one of my favorite, if not favorite, ode to cinema as an art form in itself. And the reason why I didn't actually include this in my top five was because I was kind of on the fence of it being like 100% a coming of age, because we do jump into the future as well. So I was
Mhm.
like, oh, well, if it's going back and forth through timelines, does that fully count? I don't know. I guess it does. I don't know. What do you think, George?
I would
Yeah.
say it does because I think especially I guess when we're talking about the past, it's for sure more of a coming of age film, but I could see where the confusion would lie.
Yeah.
But I would say it's a traditional, maybe not, maybe traditional is the wrong word, but I would say it's coming of
You would
age.
count it. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
But yeah, I would say so too, because like you said, in the past, Toto, the lead, he does grow
Mm.
up. He learns so much about his life through his mentor and his friend, that projectionist. And he goes through so many significant emotional losses and changes. I sobbed my eyes out whenever I watched this movie, especially that final act that always leaves me in tears in the movie theater. Oh my God. So yeah, that's my first honorable mention pick.
How many are we doing for honorable mentions? Just so I
Oh,
because
did I not say? You have so
now
many.
I gotta like pick and choose.
I was gonna do five total.
Okay, perfect.
Yeah.
All right, so my next one, I was actually between this and Wallflower as being like the number five on my actual five favorites,
Mhm.
and that's Greta Gerwig's Lady Bird.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, I adore this movie. A big part of it is Saoirse Ronan.
Mhm.
I truly, truly, truly think she's on her way to being like one of the greats, if she's not
Yeah.
there already. Because she's got the Oscar nominations, she's got Lady Bird, she's got Little Women, she's got Atonement, she's got Grand Budapest. Like she's got such an insane filmography for being like, what is she, my age, 27,
Yeah, I
28
think
years
so.
old. But outside of that, I think Lady Bird is one of the best depictions of high school life. You know, you have kind of like that shaky relationship with your parents because you feel like you're too mature to be like bothered by parents, but you also have Lady Bird going, Christine, but I'll call her Lady Bird. You also have Lady Bird going through this point in her life where she's approaching graduation, she's approaching college decisions, she has kind of no idea what she wants to do, she has a slightly shaky relationship with her mom. It's all very emotional, it's heartbreaking, it's heartwarming at the same time. It's just one of my favorite high school depictions in coming of age films. But I picked Wallflower because I think I gravitate more towards Wallflower's lessons on mental health than I do
Mhm.
Ladybirds. But both phenomenal movies, obviously.
Yeah, like I said, I haven't seen Perks in ages, but I think that I would agree with you there. It's just one that I gravitate to more. Although Lady Bird has just a phenomenal script. Like I love the script
Yeah.
itself. The dialogue in Lady Bird is so good. So my next one, kind of a strange pick. Again, wasn't sure if it counts. That's why I didn't pick it in my actual top five. The Umbrellas of Cherbourg from 1964. I don't know. Have you seen that one, George?
I
Not
haven't,
yet?
no. And
No.
everyone's so funny you say that. Ever since the Joker 2 trailer,
Yeah.
everyone keeps telling me to watch that movie. So it's on my watch list and I will get around to it. Because
Yeah,
that's
but
the same filmmaker as Young Girls, right?
yes, 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 yes,
Okay.
yes, yes.
Which
Which
I
is my
love the Young
favorite.
Girls.
Oh,
Yeah.
it's so good.
It is so good.
So good. But so the reason why I picked this one is, I mean, ultimately it's a tale of love that doesn't work out. But I firmly believe that it contains themes of coming of age, because our lead in this one, when the movie starts, she's 17, Genevieve, Catherine Deneuve's character. And at the start of the movie, she has this like perfect romance with the love of her life. Things are going so great. And then they get ripped apart and he has to go off to war. So to me, that does have coming of age elements of things not panning out how you want them to when you're still, again, she's 17 and things aren't working out. So she has to choose a path that ultimately, is it wrong? Is it right? Who knows? But she has to live with the consequences of her choices. So that is my second, I think, honorable mention.
All right. My third, three.
Third?
I'm at three.
Yeah, yeah.
Third. Okay, untraditional pick because I don't even know if I would consider this a movie. I'm gonna go with Bo Burnham's Inside.
Oh.
I love it. I think it is, from a production standpoint, I think it's one of the most impressive things I've ever seen. He is writing, he is directing, he is editing, he is acting, he's writing his own music. It's the most insane thing ever. And I would consider it coming of age because in the middle of it he turns 30 and there's a good portion of this where he's kind of like
Oh.
he's reflecting on his age and kind of what it means to like now be 30 and kind of like move into this next decade of his life while crossing like the milestone of 30 years old. I love it. He is tackling everything. He is tackling turning 30. He's like doing songs on FaceTime with your mom, which are just so relatable. He's talking about white women on Instagram. He's talking about everything. And I think it is so relevant to society today, but it does also play into like coming of age just because of where he's at in his life. And it's also just, you're watching this man. So basically, he's in like, he locks himself in a room for a year and makes this movie. So you're kind of also watching this man just like spiral out of control. And while you're watching it, you don't know if he's like spiraling because he's locked in a room doing this to himself, or if he's just letting his age and his mental health get to him because of the uncertainty of life and what it means to be 30. So I think this is just, it's one of the more unique coming of age films. If you were to watch it and tell me it's not even a coming of age film, I would not argue with you at all. But I see it as a coming of age film, and I definitely wanted to shout that one out because I love it so much.
I like that movie too. I never thought of it as a coming of age, but you just sold it to me as one. Absolutely. So now I
But
want
again,
to
if
revisit
yeah,
it.
if you told me to like go fuck myself, like George, that is not a coming of age film, I would have been like, you know what, you're probably right. You are most likely right. But yeah,
But
the way
I
I
mean,
see it, I could see arguments for both sides.
yeah, but like we said at the start, like you don't have to be, there's no cutoff for a coming of age. And like you said, he turns 30, but he's reflecting on his past. So that to me, I think that counts. But
Yeah.
we'll find out what anybody else says. So next for me, I'm gonna go with the first Hayao Miyazaki movie I watched, one that got me hooked on Studio Ghibli, and it still remains my favorite. Obviously, Spirited Away in 2001. Yeah, this hit me when I was making this list. I almost actually put this in my actual top five because I love Spirited Away so much. It's so comforting. It just whisks you away. I really see it as a perfect film as a whole and just a wonderful coming of age story because we watch our lead, Chihiro. She has to grow up. She has no choice. She has to go through this enormous transformation to make it back home. And she has to confront her fears. She has to gain a sense of independence. And she goes through all of this alone and she's forced into it, like I said. So she stumbles her way throughout and she can be stubborn. She's not this like perfect character. She has her flaws, but she keeps trying. And she does all of this with compassion and kindness. And that's how she's going to make it back. So it's just a film that's really dear to me. It has a phenomenal score. It's Spirited Away. What else? What else can I say? It's Spirited Away. So
Yeah,
that's it for me.
that you could have said Spirited Away and then stopped there.
Yeah,
Everyone
exactly.
knows its impact. It is such an impactful film. It's, I shit you not, it was going to be one of my next two films that
Oh
I mentioned.
wow.
So I'm happy you said it because it
Mhm.
gives me more space to shout out two more films. But yeah, it's so good. So funny enough, my sister watched Spirited Away for the first time like a couple
Oh.
weeks ago, and she texted me and she's like, "George, this is a horror movie. This is not a coming of age film." And I'm like, "Yeah, I'm sorry. I should have prepared you. It is an interesting watch if you go in like empty handed and you go in
Mhm.
blind, not knowing like exactly what to expect." But yeah, I still think years later, this is still Miyazaki's best. Obviously, he's nearing the end of his career,
Mhm.
unfortunately, but I don't see him surpassing Spirited Away. I think this is one of not only the great coming of age films, not only one of the great animated films, it is just one of the greats. Period.
Period.
I think it is that good.
Absolutely. No, I agree with you. And like I said, I don't think it's going to top my first spot of his when it comes to his filmography either. So, yeah.
He's so
What's your
good.
next one, George?
All right, my next one, I'm gonna I'm going to go with, again, I would be doing myself a disservice not mentioning these movies
Wait,
because
can I
they are my
guess?
most, sure.
Super bad. Is it super
No
bad?
way.
That was my
It is,
final one too.
that's an insane
I knew it.
guess.
I knew it. I knew it.
Yeah, I'd be like, again, I always want to like just like sound sophisticated, but like I need to shout out
I
Superbad.
love super bad.
It's just it's so rewatchable. It is so infectiously joyous. Michael Cera, Jonah Hill, Christopher Mintz are just some of just the best chemistry in film I've ever seen, which is crazy to say about a fucking early mid 2000s comedy movie, but I love it so much. It is just another just guys being dudes movie. All they want is alcohol for a party. That's it. That's the whole movie, and it's done to perfection because then you're throwing in these conversations of moving on to college and separating the friend group, which causes some turmoil within the friend group. I think it's so good, and again, I would be doing myself and my taste in movies a disservice by not mentioning Superbad and American Pie.
Yeah.
I love those movies so much, and Superbad, again, I think I've logged it on Letterboxd like 3 or 4 times, but if you go even before my Letterboxd, I've probably seen this movie 15 to 20 times.
Yeah.
It is so good. It's such an easy watch.
Yeah, that's the same with me. I can quote this movie by heart probably. I love it. There's so many scenes that I will say are my favorite scenes on any given day. Like this whole movie is my favorite scene. But yeah, that was gonna be my next one too. So I guess that I have nothing else to say besides what you just said. It's also, I mean, along with being just one of my favorite, or I guess I didn't include it in my top 5 coming of age movies, but what I will say is it's one of my favorite comedies. Like it's
Yeah.
of all time, probably my top 5 favorite comedies. I think it's so funny. I think it's incredible. You should check out as well by Greg Mottola, The Day Trippers. Have you seen The Day Trippers?
I have not, no.
So he did that before Superbad, and there's like a massive gap in time. The Day Trippers, I think, came out, gosh, I can't remember now, in the 90s. I don't
Mhm.
remember what year exactly. And then he paused and then he made Superbad, but I think you'd really like The Day Trippers as well.
Okay, yeah, I'll definitely if it's the same filmmaker, I will absolutely add that to
Yeah.
my watch
Yeah,
list.
yeah, yeah. So that's, I mean, yeah, I have nothing else to add besides Superbad. I mean, I have one more pick, but you can go next. But
All right, my
last one.
final pick was going to be I Saw the TV Glow, but again, I don't want to like talk about that movie.
Okay.
Well, that's a lie. I do want to talk about that movie. All I want to do right now is talk about that movie. But
You
for
can.
yours, no. Because I trust me, I really do think that's an experience and a movie you need to feel. And I don't want to like
Okay.
I don't want to accidentally say too much that'll like affect your experience because I think
Okay.
everyone's going to be affected by that movie very
Ooh.
differently. So I'm going to go with another classic, another probably cliche pick, but one of my favorite performances ever out of Robin Williams in Good Will Hunting.
Oh.
Love this movie. This is where I think we could go back to our earlier conversation about coming of age and like what age would you cap it off
Mm-hmm.
at? Because obviously this is a coming of age film for Will Hunting and Matt Damon's character, but I think you could also see it as a coming of age for Sean Maguire, Robin Williams' character. And there's this one very powerful scene. It's one of my favorite scenes ever in coming of age where Matt Damon asks Robin Williams, like, when did you know that like his wife was the woman? And he goes into this whole story about how he missed one of the most iconic baseball games ever. It was like game 6 of like a Red Sox World Series to stay at a bar because he saw a girl. That's it. He saw the girl and he was like, I just knew in that moment that was the woman that I wanted to spend the rest of my life with. And Matt Damon then goes on to, I'm sorry for like just recounting an entire scene, but Matt Damon goes on to ask Robin Williams, like, do you regret missing that game? And Robin Williams goes into this is such an emotional rant where he's like, no, I don't regret missing that game. I don't regret the 17 years I spent with my wife. I don't regret, leaving therapy when she got sick. And I certainly don't regret missing that damn game. And it's such, oh my God, it is so heartfelt and raw and emotional. And I truly think Robin Williams is just a generational talent we will never see again. The passion in his performance, the authenticity, the sheer emotion that he gets out of me from this role is so good. Obviously, everyone remembers Matt Damon. He puts on probably his best. I'd really have to look at his filmography, but this is probably his best performance as well. But Robin Williams is a standout to me. And again, that just goes back to our conversation on like, what age would you cap coming of age films at? Endless. It doesn't matter what age you are. I think the possibilities of coming of age, and I think this movie is just such a reflection of that.
Yeah, I mean, this is why I love talking about the coming of age genre, because I feel like people can come up with so many different answers. Like, I did not think of this as one. But again, it's just another situation where you just sold it to me. And yeah, I absolutely agree with you that it is. So, I mean, there you go. The possibilities are endless. So, last one for me, what was it? I actually am confused for a second now because you threw me off with Superbad. um, but I think I'm going to go with a Fellini pick. Going to go back to the highbrow. And it's one that I rewatched recently. And it's only after this rewatch that I saw it as a coming of age, and that's Evie Toloni from 1953. And similar to Frances Ha or what you were just talking about, this is just leads that are older than what you would expect from a traditional coming of age. I think in this one they're in their early to mid 20s, I would say. And it captures again, as I keep saying, this sort of aimlessness in your 20s when people around you are considering you as an adult, but you're just bumbling around. I guess now that I'm saying all of these, this is clearly a theme in my life. Um, but what I found interesting during this rewatch recently, and how it like dawned on me that this is a coming of age, is because I watched it. This is going to sound crazy. After I watched Clerks by Kevin Smith, and very weird, I know, but this portrayal of disillusionment, I guess, with people around that age is quite similar. So I do believe that if you were to take Evie Toloni and Clerks and just swap out living in the 90s in America for provincial living in the Italies in the 1950s, it's kind of the same film. I'm gonna get butchered for this online, I already know, but that's fine. But even the title of the film, Evie Toloni, that translates to the young calves in English, which carries like a colloquial meaning of young slackers. So I mean, I'm not wrong. And yeah, a lot of the leads in this one are jerks. They're a group of guys, and they're not the best characters, but Fellini approaches all this with a sense of humor while also not moralizing anything, which I really like. He really lets the audience come up with their own conclusions. And I don't want to spoil the film because there is a lot that happens, and I think it's worthwhile checking out. It's very underrated in Fellini's filmography, but that's my last one. Have you seen it, George? No, I don't think so.
I hate to admit it, I haven't even seen Clerks.
Oh,
So yeah, so that whole comparison just went right over my head. I've
you'd
not seen
like
either.
Clerks. I think you would. I don't know.
Everyone says that. I think Ash rates it pretty highly. I
Yeah.
think that's like one of her favorites. So I've been meaning to watch it. Especially because Ash loved Uptown Girls. So
Mhm.
now I'm big on her filmography and what she likes. So I've been meaning to watch Clerks. But yeah, I unfortunately cannot input
Fair.
anything into that
Fair.
conversation.
That's fair. I mean, listen, I could be the only one that's comparing a Fellini film to Kevin Smith, so who's to say? But yeah, I guess those were our picks to, I guess, go over my top 5 actual ones. I went with Y Tu Mama Tambien, The Graduate, 400 Blows, Aperagito, and Frances Ha. Honorable mentions were Cinema Paradiso, Umbrellas of Cherbourg, Spirited Away, Evie Toloni, and Superbad. What were yours?
I went also with Frances Ha, Almost
Yes.
Famous. Everybody wants Sing Street and Perks of Being a Wallflower. And then American Pie, Super Bad, Lady. It's such a crazy switch up from my first 5 to American Pie, then Super Bad. And now we're going back to Lady Bird, Bo Burnham's Inside,
Mhm.
and Good Will Hunting.
Yeah, this was eclectic from both of us. This was so weird. I never thought that I would include like
Uh,
Superbad and like an Indian movie from the 50s on the same list, but
uh, that's the
that's
beauty of coming of
exactly.
age.
It is. We're all just coming of age.
Uh,
Well, yeah, I guess that's it for today. Thank you so much for coming on, making the time. I really appreciate it. I thought this was great. How can people find you, support Real Talk? Anything you want to
yeah,
shout out?
well, thank you for having me. Obviously, I remember like this had to be like a year ago. You were
Yeah.
talking to me about starting a podcast, and you didn't even have like the wheels in motion. So
No.
you've come so far. I'm so proud of you. This is awesome.
Thank you.
You can find me everywhere. TikTok, Movies and Stuff 14, ReelTok podcast, and then George Carmi everywhere else. Letterboxd, I'm obviously very, very active on. Instagram, not too active except for stories, but you can find me all over.
You're everywhere. Perfect. Well, thanks for coming on, George. Hopefully you come back and I'll talk to you soon.
Yes. All
Bye.
right. Thank you very much.